7:34 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, we started it last week. Well, let's continue it today, our conversation in relation to gender-based violence. And today we discuss the importance of health and family life education in schools and preventing gender-based violence. We're joined by two guests to give us their perspectives on this very vexing and current issue in Trinidad and Tobago. We have Dr. Gabriel Hussein, head of the Institute of Gender and Development Studies at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine. And also with us is Kevin Liverpool, administrator of CARIMAN, the Caribbean Male Action Network. Good morning to you both. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Dr. Hussein, you have been on the front line as far as the raising awareness to these issues with the protest action in the midst of the very latest tragedy involving Andrea Barrett. Where do you would like to start this conversation this morning, Dr. Hussein, as far as this entire issue of gender-based violence in a place like Trinidad and Tobago?
Morning, Fazeer. Morning to your viewers. I'd like to start this morning, we're here to talk about health and family life education or comprehensive sexuality education. Your viewers may have seen some of the kind of concerns raised by some of the religious groups late last year prior to the killing of Ashanti Riley and the tragic killing of Andrea Barrett. And I want us to return to that conversation because out of those tragic deaths and out of the immense public response has been a call for us to do gender-based violence education and prevention in primary and secondary schools. And so the nation should know that that's exactly what is happening, that in fact the HFLE curriculum, the health and family life curriculum, is being amended, is being rewritten to include gender-based violence prevention for both primary and secondary schools. And so I think it's important for us as a nation to understand what the concerns are, to address those concerns, but also to be fully on board in this program and in making sure that HFLE in schools has the momentum it can have and is able to make the difference it's able to.
And Mr. Liverpool, good morning to you as well. Just give me your opening perspective in relation to this issue, please.
So one of the things I want to add to what Dr. Hussein shared is that often when we hear sex education, there's often some resistance. But sex and sexuality education is not about teaching young people how to have sex, and nor is it encouraging young people to have sex. So it's important that we look at it and really understand what it means. It goes by many different names, including, as Dr. Hussein mentioned, health and family life education.
And Dr. Hussein, what are you anticipating? Because we often get resistance in different areas. Just mentioning the word sex education gets people worked up for all sorts of different reasons. Even if you frame it now as health and family life education, people say that that's a cover for exposing children to things that they shouldn't be exposed to. How do you integrate this into our education system in a way that people could properly benefit from it?
So the health and family life curriculum has been around for a long time. It's well established. It's not a radical curriculum, and it is absolutely focused on providing children with the information that they need to be able to make safe and healthy choices for themselves, for each other, as well as to protect themselves by understanding better what is happening to their body, both in terms of biological changes as well as in terms of the social environment that they're growing up in. And the thing about girls entering puberty is we know in our country that girls are at a particular risk. And so having this kind of moment for teachers who are trusted figures in our national curriculum to be able to speak with children and say, listen, this information is meant to complement what you're getting at home. It in no way challenges what parents may be teaching children, but what it does do is provide one message to children of all ages across the country about consent, about their rights, and about what making safe and healthy choices means. And in a society where children are so vulnerable and where so many would say, listen, we want to leave health and family life education or sex education to parents, but where we know that so many parents don't have these conversations with their children. Either they're unwilling, or they're embarrassed, or they're unable, or they don't have the information themselves, or children are growing up in violent contexts, including contexts with sexual violence. I think that this helps us to protect not the ones getting the information at home only, but the ones who are not, and is a real reach for us as a nation across religious groups to do what we most can do to protect the most vulnerable. And this certainly is, I think, the most comprehensive way.
Mr. Liverpool, from your own experience, can this work? Because when we talk about not just young women, young men, especially, and the way they're exposed, we live in a society where everything is about sex, everything is sexualized, and we know all of the attendant consequences of that, and therefore, can we actually see that if and when we do get back to the school environment as it was before COVID-19, or even online? Can that sort of discussion take place in a co-ed environment with young men and young women sitting in the same classroom, in the same space, virtual or otherwise, discussing these topics with their teachers? Do you see that working effectively?
So what I can say, Fazeer, is that when we don't have a sexuality education, we leave children to learn about sex and sexuality from very unsafe sources. Sources such as online pornography, sources such as their peer group and popular opinions, sources such as past abusive relationships, or through experimentation. I remember years ago when I was a secondary teacher, some of the male students were talking about if they don't have enough money to purchase a condom, then they can use a Pennacool pack. Or if they are unaware of a person's HIV status, they can double up on a condom just to protect themselves. So it's these very dangerous views that we leave children with when we don't have well-tested. And the thing about the curriculum, it's well-tested. It's not just something that's just picked up and patched together. It's something that Dr. Hussain and her colleagues and the personnel at the Ministry of Education has been working on to make sure that it is evidence-based, and it is something that would deliver the content that children need. And it's age appropriate as well.
Absolutely.
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Hussain, go ahead.
This next phase of integrating gender-based violence prevention, which by the way is something that we have been calling for years, is happening. So the curriculum will be developed in consultation with teachers through consultations, and will include training sessions for teachers to help them prepare to deliver the curriculum. And teachers are members of families, they're members of religious groups also, they're citizens, they're grandparents or parents. And so, we have to trust the process. It's being led by the School of Education and curriculum experts at the UWI, as well as in collaboration with the IGDS. And I just want us to keep in mind, when I heard some of the backlash to this curriculum last year coming from some of the denominational schools, I thought, if only they had reached out to us, and I'm making an invitation to reach out to us, we would have been able to answer so many of those concerns and questions, so that people would think, oh, this is, as Kevin's saying, this is teaching about sex, but actually it's not. It's actually giving you all the information that can actually protect children of all ages, including from sexual abuse. And we have to really put sexual abuse on the front burner as adults, because as a society, we have not significantly confronted that. And so when we talk prevention, this is exactly the kind of curriculum that can enable prevention, early identification, greater protection of children, of themselves and of each other. And so, we have an investment in that across religion, across family, across geography, across belief system. And I think that's the unifying thread, for this curriculum.
And before I go back to Mr. Liverpool, if I could ask you, Dr. Hussain, do you really believe that resistance, whether from the denominational boards or other organizations who feel that this sort of discussion should not take place in the school environment, do you think that resistance will actually disappear and allow for this program to be implemented?
I don't think we're looking for it to disappear. I think we're looking for dialogue, because I feel quite certain that when we sit and talk to each other, and that's what we intend to do, and that's what we'll be reaching out to do, rather than talk to each other through the press only, or in combative ways, that actually we're going to agree on so much. We're going to agree that we need prevention strategies. We're going to agree that we need to hold the state accountable for those prevention strategies. We're going to agree that gender-based violence prevention needs to start in primary school, because children are growing up in violent contexts, the most vulnerable of them, who don't have the parents who can necessarily protect them, and who may be vulnerable to their own family members. We're going to agree that when we look at the curriculum in detail, that actually it is a lovely curriculum. It meets all of the criteria of what any of us would want to teach our children. Actually reach out, because I'm not looking for it to disappear. I'm looking for understanding and consensus to grow, and I think that that's exactly where we're headed.
Well, Mr. Liverpool, I'm glad that you mentioned that you're involved in the teaching environment yourself, because are you satisfied that we have the necessary level of training and expertise, or if that has to be done? Because it's an environment. I mean, I remember the only thing I was interested when I got my first biology textbook in the late 1970s was to go to the section on reproduction. That's the only reason I was interested in biology at that time. But how difficult is it to have in a teaching environment with all the many different challenges, to have people trained and be aware of all of the issues and sensitivity that would be required in dispensing information related to health and family life and sexuality and so on, Mr. Liverpool?
Yeah, so it is a process, and as Dr. Hussain said, it starts with that dialogue between the different groups. So teachers need to be on board, the religious groups need to be on board, and I think once we have that open dialogue and we begin to come on the same page to understand what sexuality education is and what it requires, I think it can start that process moving forward. And the curriculum is important for all of society. For those who have children in school, we know that even though we send them to school to learn, subjects that we're comfortable with, like maths and English, we don't just leave them to do the work on their own. When they get home, parents play a role as well in reinforcing what they learn. So likewise, with the HFLE curriculum, it's expected that parents have that role to play to reinforce some of these concepts at home.
And in the time that we have available, if I could just broaden the discussion just a little bit, Dr. Hussain, by saying that, you can't eliminate the external influences, and therefore, as effective as a health and family life education system and structure could be, and however effectively implemented, how much of the influences of everyday life, whether you're talking media, whether you're talking about social media, whether you're talking about other elements of the internet, or just general interaction with a wider society that has certain negative attitudes towards women and sex and so on, how much is that sort of situation? Can the education that is imparted in the school environment, how will that not be impacted by what is going on outside?
Well, as we've been saying, Fazeer, we have to give children a fighting chance, don't we? We have been calling for prevention, not just response, and we have been calling for changing dangerous social norms, harmful gender norms, re-socializing children so that they can have healthy and non-violent relationships, particularly between boys and girls as they grow in life into women and men. So this is responding to exactly what the population was asking for over those weeks when we were protesting and saying, we need to transform masculinities. We need to teach men and women how to have peaceful and healthy relations with each other. We need to create bases for communication. And so children who are growing up in contexts that are full of beliefs and values, practices and messages that can be both confusing and harmful, a national curriculum where the state is held accountable for ensuring that all children, regardless of their vulnerabilities, have access to the information that can better allow them to protect themselves. It's our responsibility to give them a fighting chance, and this is what that is. We can't march in the streets and hold placards, and then when the moment comes to actually make the kinds of differences that we can, we step back and say, no, we'd like the status quo the way it is. Our children can change our whole society if we give them the chance to do so in collaboration with teachers, parents, the Ministry of Education, gender experts, your curriculum experts. You know, this is a whole society approach as much as it is a whole family approach, as much as it is a whole school approach. If we are going to march and say we need change, this is exactly where it starts. And this is certainly where, if you have concerns, reach out. We can walk you through the curriculum. And when you leave, you're going to think, well, actually, this is excellent. I'm going to take this home. I'm going to take this into my community setting. Actually, there's a ton of great ideas and language and concepts in here that can really help me walk adolescents and children wherever they are through better understanding not only their bodies, their sexuality and their choices, but those around them, and to help ultimately to protect themselves and each other. And this is what that intends to do.
And let me leave a final word with Mr. Liverpool as well. Again, just to precede the question, against an avalanche of commercially driven negative perceptions which seem to dominate every aspect of our existence in this place. Are you confident that such a comprehensive program will actually succeed?
Yeah, so sexuality education will actually improve the resilience of young people. When we think of beliefs and biases such as men ought to be sexually aggressive and men can have multiple partners while women ought to be sexually submissive, we see how these things can be linked to gender-based violence. Often when persons are commenting on sexual education, they say that we prefer to promote abstinence. And one of the things is that abstinence will be included in comprehensive sexuality education, that ability to delay sexual activity until you're more responsible and ready. What abstinence is not is leaving children ignorant and leaving children misinformed.
Good point that in which we can conclude our discussion this morning. Thank you very much, Dr. Hussain and Mr. Liverpool as well for taking the time to be with us this morning. It is an ongoing conversation and requires a level of determination and persistence of all of us in this place called Trinidad and Tobago.